Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Coach Fury here. We've been away for a little while talking about some CSL. We've had the off season. We've had the draft. We kind of bypassed that and didn't talk about that on the show. And we're now into the season, and we're kind of doing a bit of a belated season preview. The initial plan was to try and do this before the season started, but 13, 16 games in, who cares? Let's try and tackle through it. And today I'm joined by a couple of guests to help me through this. First up is sort of a regular on the show, Miles, the commissioner, Lord Chief. Some call him a bit of a dictator. How are you doing?
Please, Lord Dictator is the
Lord
proper name.
Dictator. Okay.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Good, good. Well, I won't talk about Denver because I don't want to hear the gloating at the moment. But we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to the actual Northwest Division. But we're also joined today by a newcomer to the show, Billy. How are you doing?
I'd be good, but we need to figure out how to get Kawhi back into San Antonio in real life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it ain't gonna happen. But your San Antonio Spurs are probably performing the same way that the real life guys are gonna do this year without Kawhi.
Uh, well, I hope the real life does better than my team.
Cool. So yeah, let's dive in. So we're going to talk today a little bit about as you could probably guess by all three of us being in the Western Conference. We're going to talk about that conference, and we'll just see what how the divisions look up and who the contenders are going to be, who are going to be the teams that are going to lose out. We've seen approximately 15 games so far this year, 16 games for some teams. And let's see how it's panned out, see if it's along the lines of what we all thought it was going to be, how we think it's going to finish up. But let's go straight in there with the Southwest Division. So, Billy, I mean, this is your division. You have a little bit more of an insight to it probably than we do. Is this kind of
Yeah,
how you're seeing it play out so far, or you seeing it sort of shape out a little bit differently when the season finishes?
I think really the big surprise for me is Houston. I thought Houston would be closer to a 500 team, and actually their inside-outside duo, actually foursome of Bertans, Monk, and Towns and Love have been pretty effective so far earlier in the season. So, I mean, the division, I was not expecting Houston to do this well this early, but it looks like they're really a strong contender in the West and a strong contender for the Southwest Division. Um, but you still have Dallas there and Memphis still right behind them. That it's still early in the season, so who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this division's kind of has always been Dallas's since I've been around. Obviously, Houston had that championship run before I got here. I mean, Miles, do you kind of see this changing before the end of the season? Do you see Houston still being up there?
I mean, look, we're like what, one game difference between Houston and Dallas. We very easily could have like done this discussion in a week and Dallas would be back on top. You don't know. I don't think Houston's the best team in the division. I think that they're, like Billy said, a 500 team. They have a lot of talented players, but a lot of flawed players at the same time. Two of their most played players and Love and Bertans aren't great defensively, and Ulis isn't either. So I just they're going to be fine. They're going to win games because they can really shoot the ball and they'll score a lot, and they're going to lose games because they're going to let the other team do the same thing. So and Biz is he's gonna mess around with lineups all season long. So they'll be fine. They'll probably make the playoffs.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
they
it's
still.
yeah. Go on.
Sorry, the thing I like about Houston is they have flexibility and to make some moves. So I would expect Biz to pull a couple triggers now to be more competitive. So I definitely expect them to be a playoff team this year.
Yeah, we've seen them make the first day 30 moves today, moving Marble over to division contender and rival to pick up a first round pick. So we know they're going to certainly be active. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but do you really see Kevin Love staying there this whole season?
I could see him staying there this season, but maybe next off season that he'll move him. I mean, it just depends how they do over the next 30 days. I mean, if they're a playoff team, why wouldn't they stick with the Love Towns combination?
Yeah, for me, I think it has less to do with how Houston performs and more to do with the offers they get for Love. I think that there is, a certain price that Biz has set for Love. Maybe not like literally sat down and like wrote down on a piece of paper what he wants, but in his mind, he's got that, kind of idea of what he's going to get in return for Love. And I think whether that happens during this season, during next season, during the off season, whenever it is, he'll wait for that.
And I
Yeah,
think the one thing that's interesting too, now with this recent trade, even though they're not great picks, he has 3 first-round picks this year. So that's a lot of flexibility there.
yeah, certainly. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, this division to me is kind of Dallas and then anyone else apart from, I have to say, apart from San Antonio, could be in the playoff mix. I mean, let's talk about Dallas quickly.
Yeah.
Obviously, they had some interesting moves this offseason, moving Curry for Reed. Billy, do you think it's business as usual for Dallas, or do you think that this is finally the season that the age of the roster catches up with them?
I really do think it's where age catches up with them. I mean, you look at their starting five, and they're all four of the five of them are all well over their 30s, and they're still in a tough spot contractually too, so financially. So I'll be interested to see what they do. I mean, they've got some great talent that are still in their early 30s, but Ibaka's 33, and Rose and Kenneth Faried is 32. So I mean, they're going to start declining, including George. So I think this is it. We'll be interested to see if they trade off one of their key stars there for maybe some younger assets and some flexibility financially later on in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You never know with what Brett's going to do. I mean, much you've seen Brett in some other leagues. Do you think that this Dallas team is at its end? Do you think he's going to really accept that they're going to have to take a real downward step to get back up?
I mean, I think Brett is going to do whatever he needs to do to try to remain at or near the top. Like I don't think Brett is the kind of guy to like just let this team run its course, and I also don't think he's the kind of guy to blow it up. I think he's the kind of guy to take each move as it comes and try with each move to continue to improve the team. Right? I think that's always like his goal is it's not necessarily right. Like this Curry for free trade was a trade that you could say was a step back, but it was one that he needed to make. But at the same time, turning James Harden into Paul George was like a step forward. So like in my mind, at least, in terms of like what they can do on the court. And so I think that it's kind of like he's going to keep trying to toe that line for as long as he can. And Dallas will meet its end when Brett has a couple of moves in a row that are on the wrong side of that line. Not necessarily intentionally, just he makes a couple deals that don't work out for him. And I think that's when we're going to see, and that each move that he makes up until then leads him more and more likely to that point, right? Like this team that we're seeing now is probably more likely to be at their end than the team that we had a couple of seasons ago. So I think it's trending that way, but I wouldn't say that it's 100% going to be that way.
Yeah, I was going to say most of his assets are on the declining side of their career, so it's going to be interesting to see if he's willing to pull the trigger now or wait it out and see how the team performs, and then obviously their value will be lower a year from now, all being 33 and 34, earning almost $20 million each.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dallas are probably one of the teams that I would expect to make a move this season, or a couple of moves. I don't know what he's going to do, but I can't see him taking moves that are, like you said, are not going to try and push them back into that contention rather than just being a playoff team, which you could probably argue they are now. So be interested to see how they do. I guess the rest of the division, I mean, I don't want to talk about the Spurs necessarily in this straight away because I think we can save them for something later on in the episode. But we've got the Grizzlies and the Pelicans. I mean, both could arguably be playoff teams. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you think both could be playoff teams, or one will get in, or how do you see that playing out?
I mean, I think Memphis. I mean, they're back to defense now, so I think they'll figure things out. Will they be a top four seed? No, but I think they'll find themselves in the playoffs and probably make some noise there with whoever they play.
That's funny. I feel more strongly about the Pelicans and the Grizzlies, simply because the Pelicans have more talent. I think Chandler Parsons is underplaying right now what he could be, and I think that there's a better chance for the Pelicans to be that team that makes noise because, you're just a couple of good Anthony Davis games away from beating pretty much any team that they face. So I think that that's really the team to be watching out for. As good as Andre is as a general manager and a coach, I just don't know how I feel about his chances with that roster.
Yeah, but he's one of those coaches that have been able to turn out a lot with some of the talent he's had on the roster. So, uh, based off his NL history, I just don't want to bet against.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw in there that just flicking through now. I mean, the points differential across those, top four teams in the Southwest. The top two teams are Dallas and Memphis. Houston are closer, and the Pelicans have actually got a negative point differential. So, you know, could argue the schedule's probably favoured some of these guys a little bit so far. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement that it's kind of Dallas, Houston, and then probably either the Grizzlies or the Pelicans making it into the playoffs, and then the other team unfortunately missing out. So let's move on to the Northwest Division. So Miles, we'll start with you. Denver are looking okay so far.
Yeah, that's not gonna last. Like I love my team and I love my team. I like the players that we have. But I'm just gonna be real. Like, even though our schedule was like road heavy to begin with, and we've had, multiple games against some of the tougher teams. Like I've already played Phoenix twice. I've had a lot of good luck so far in terms of like players performance. Like Josh Hart started the season shooting over like 50%. Like I didn't get Josh Hart at like 43rd or 46th overall, because he can play point guard and shoot over 50%. Like that's not going to continue. Tyrone Wallace is doing pretty well. And I just don't see that like the what's what I'm looking for, like the overall composite of this team performing as well as they have. There's a couple of players that I expect, like Josh Jackson, Bruno Caboclo, who have been really good, and I expect them to continue to be good. But just overall, I'm just not expecting 500 ball from this team. Though I would love it. I would appreciate it.
Hey, Miles, are you surprised by Jackson's performance? I mean, he's shooting 45% from the three. That kind of surprised me, adding his strong defense there.
Actually, I knew because I scouted him so much. I knew that he was always going to be able to shoot the ball pretty well. Like he actually has pretty good shooting ratings from all the different areas. What I was more concerned about was like his lack of handle and lack of rebounding would leave him positionless because he's not a great rebounder and he's a pretty terrible ball handler. And so I was worried that would either hold him back at a perimeter position or hold him back from being like a really good big man. And he's not turning the ball over a ton. And so that's kind of made me realize that maybe that he can succeed on the perimeter, as long as he's just smart about not, dribbling the ball into the defender.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're above me, so I can't comment too much. But I mean, Josh Jackson was my favorite guy who got drafted this year, so I'm pleased to see him starting so well. So you never know. Denver 0.500, you could make the playoffs. We'll see. I mean, looking at the rest of the division, I mean, when I looked at this before the start of the season, I had in my head that this would play out as OKC at top because of some of the moves they've made, and we'll talk about them in a minute. The Jazz probably next, then probably us myself with the Trailblazers. I thought we'd be around a 7th, 8th seed this year because we didn't make any moves, and then probably the Nuggets, and then the Timberwolves. But I mean, Billy, is it time we start thinking about the Jazz as being a legitimate contender after their start?
I mean, they're deep, and then they have a nice blend of both inside and outside scoring. So I do think they're a contender. We'll see what the team looks like at the end of the year, but you have to love what the Curry Levine combination, and then seeing what Kristaps has been able to do now in this year. I mean, he looks like a bona fide superstar in the NLL. So I mean, it was a great move picking them up for Exum, especially after seeing what happened to Dante in Atlanta this year. So I think they have a good path moving forward with Kristaps being their superstar.
Yeah, I mean, Miles, did you share that? Do you think the Jazz are one of the teams to beat in the conference as well as the Northwest Division this year, or do you think it's just a hot start for them?
No, because I think the thing that makes a difference for them is Kristaps. I think coming into this season, I thought that they were going to be a playoff team, especially after they made the Curry trade, but it was going to be, they weren't going to have that number one guy. And he stepped forward and he's been the number one guy. And it's not that he's just making shots. He's being aggressive, right? Like, we're not talking like, oh, he's shooting 65%. That's not going to, happen forever. Like, no, he's taking 18 shots a game, getting to the free throw line 6 times a game. He's playing really aggressively. That's the kind of player that they needed to carry them to where they are, to where they're at right now. And I don't see why he can't continue to do that. So as long as they still play the way they're playing, which there's really no reason why they shouldn't be able to. Kevin O'Cons, he has the game now, so he can actually put together like depth charts and stuff. I think that's going to be a huge difference maker for them as well, and they have a lot of talent.
It's amazing. I was just looking at it. I mean, Kristaps has already scored 40 points 3 different occasions and over 35 points, I believe, 5 different occasions in 13 games. So that's pretty scary. With they have other scorers like Levine and Curry there, but Kristaps is truly just dominating the paint.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Kristaps, the way that I would compare him to is it's almost looking at so far this start of the season as he's the second coming of Kevin Love with defense, basically. He will carry this team on offense, and I mean, I have to check his ratings, but I don't think he's a liability on defense. No, he's certainly not. So when you get that sort of combination, and you get it right, it tends to be lethal in DDS and in sim leagues. So, I mean, add to the fact, I'll just flick through Bamba. I mean, they got Bamba backing him up, who is just a juggernaut on defense. So, yeah, this team's deep. It started well. It's got, good shooting. It plays okay defense. Just down to Kevin getting the strategy right, I think. So, I mean,
he has all the tools now with the game, so I think it's only upwards they have to go from here now.
Yeah. And I think, it's a good start for them. It's, we're looking at saying they're deep, they look talented, they've got the right tools in place in terms of Kevin has the game. How frustrating is that for OKC? Anyone want to dive in there?
It's probably frustrating. I feel like we could have a whole separate podcast just on OKC. It is frustrating. I mean, Andrew's probably really frustrated, but I think all of us, even though they were talented, we knew something goofy was going to happen with OKC. Some reason Andrew's just never been able to bring together his talent to bring in the results that you would expect he would have. I mean, he brings the top, but he never brings the result.
Yeah, for me with OKC, like there's certain teams that you just don't look at division. If you're one of these teams, you just don't care about how things are going in your division. And I was one of those teams in the NLL when I had the Charlotte Bobcats and we were, 50-win team every year. I didn't care about what other teams in my division were doing because my sights were above that. So Oklahoma City shouldn't be in a position where they should care if Utah's at the top of the division or if they're up there. They should be worried about in terms of just like playoffs, right? Like they should be worried about Phoenix. They should be worried about Sacramento. They could be worried about Utah if Utah is going to be that good, but whether or not Utah wins the division should not be their concern. And unfortunately, though, Oklahoma City is not playing well enough for them to be in that position. They are going to be worried about that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I think he does have to be worried right now with his performance and the way the conference is. I mean, he could easily be the 4th or 5th seed and playing a team like Dallas or Utah or something like that. Or actually, let's rephrase it. They could be playing the second place team in the Pacific Division, which could be Sacramento or Phoenix, and that's tough.
Right. What I'm saying though is that his concern needs to be like he put together a team where no matter what team he faces, he should be able to expect to beat them. And
Yeah.
that's not the way that they're playing though. A month ago, he wasn't concerned about like are we going to be able to beat this team or that team. Now the way that they're playing, that is a concern. It is a concern as to whether or not they need to worry about matchups. And his team shouldn't be in that position. That's the moves that he made.
I mean,
I'm just going to dive into this. So you've got a clash of styles here in terms of the general managers of both teams. So when I look at Kevin, I mean, it pains me to say it because he's been my rival for so long. No matter what team he had, that team was always balanced. There was all a clear goal line, a clear strategy of how they were going to play, and he had the personnel always to deliver that. When I look at OKC, I instantly think it's a really I just really struggle game plan they're looking at, how they're going to get wins, how it's going to translate on the court. And that's what I think exactly what they're seeing at the moment is that they've got talent, but it's just not meshing together.
I mean, they have really two different types of players. I mean, you look at the players they brought over from Oklahoma City plus Carroll. I mean, they have the assets to be one of the top defensive teams if that's the way they want to go. But then they've got Clay and Stanley, who are kind of the opposite. They're both efficient scorers, or not. Let's just rate it. They're both good scorers there. I mean, I think he needs to go one direction or the other. I mean, if they want to be more like Houston and just be a pure offensive team. I mean, they have those assets there, and they could trade off some of those Phoenix players that they've received. Or I think going defense with Bledsoe, Carroll, and Gilchrist could be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll come back and talk about OKC in a minute when we look at contenders, dark horses, and so on. But just looking further down the Northwest Division, obviously got myself at the bottom, the Timberwolves. I mean, we'll start with the Timberwolves, I guess. No pick again this year, I think. Reminds me
Wait,
of the,
really?
Yeah.
They don't have their
the
pick
Pelicans.
Yeah.
Pelicans.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he dealt it away. I honestly can't remember what he dealt it away for now, but I remember when that happened, everyone was like, "What on earth?" But I mean, this team's going to be at the bottom for a while, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and they're not doing anything to help their cause. Sorry, Roxy. I like you, and I like your activity and how much you care. But boy, keep your picks, please.
Yeah, and they just don't have any other real tradable assets to build around. They've got two older players in Lawson and Batum. So, to your point, I don't know where they're going to go. I mean, they've got Stauskas, but he's a sixth man. I had him on my team, and he just doesn't have the scoring rating that you need for a three-point shooter like Stauskas to be that effective.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing okay. I mean, he's obviously playing from the bench again, but I mean, obviously Justin Harper stopped his 35 points a night from the preseason, which just goes to show that preseason does not matter. Anyone watching this who is new to the league, who tries to get players sold to them about preseason stats because they're not playing it, not in, not out, don't believe it. It's rubbish.
Gotta love Dennis.
Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, they've got Ty Lawson. I mean, he's probably past it now. He's probably the only one that I can think of note. I mean, I'm interested to see your guys' thoughts on, they picked up Lucas Nogueira, who was at the Bucks, who, came in and has some good ratings, but some terrible shooting stats. I mean, is it an interesting project for the Timberwolves, or is it a waste of $2 million a year, basically?
I mean, it's something to work on. For a big man to shoot essentially under 40%, that's pretty scary. But he has some decent defensive ratings there and some decent offensive rebounds. So, I mean, it could be a project, but I mean, under 40% scary, and I don't know how easily it's going to he's going to be able to correct that, especially if he doesn't have the scoring around him to negate him shooting.
Yeah, I mean, he's got decent enough ratings that I could see like a backup defensive center. Um, maybe a fifth starter defensive center, like at best. But I think the important thing though is that you can find those guys every year in free agency. You don't need to commit, 4 years and $2 million a year to that guy when I don't think he's going to be that much better than guys you can get every year off the waiver wire.
Yeah,
I mean, put it this way: I just signed Amita Brima in season free agency, and I'm not entirely positive that he's worse than Lucas Nogueira.
No, it looks fairly similar. I mean, just looks like a slightly better shooter, but I mean, that's just me just scanning. I didn't even know who he was until you mentioned him. So that's kind of how you look at it, I suppose. So
that's my point. I just don't think that it was a necessary signing to make.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to be at the bottom for a while, but they're not at the bottom at the moment because I'm currently occupying that space after a terrible start.
Don't worry, you guys are better than that. You're better than that. I know it's a tough start, but everyone knows you guys are better than that.
Yeah, I think you're my surprise for the start of the season. I really expected you to be back where you were last year.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's been saying it's been because of a slumping ability for Horford, but when I've been looking at it, it's not necessarily been that. I mean, his scoring is obviously down, but he's taking slightly less shots, so you kind of expect that. I mean, for me, it's the defense. I haven't got the strategy yet to kind of solve that really. What the style we played last year, it's not working, so it's going to take a little while to get that right, but hopefully we'll be fighting for a late playoff seed. But I mean, I think again we're in agreement that we're probably going to see this division play out as the Jazz at the top, then probably the Thunder, then probably fight between. I think me and you, Miles, actually this year. If you carry on the form, you keep it going. I mean, and then the Timberwolves probably down the bottom. I mean, does anyone see anything else other than that?
No, I think your team will probably get closer to 500 as we get to the year. So it wouldn't surprise me if you eventually pass Miles, but it'll be close.
I just want to point out that would be like the dream scenario for my season.
Well, I think you've got the talent now. I will say that. I think you've got, starting five-wise, I think you've got enough talent there to play for 0.500. And
yes, my starting point guard, Vasily Hamicic.
Oh yeah, but you can easily pick up someone who can be better than that when teams start to shed salary and start to shed players because they're realizing they're rubbish. So I don't expect that to stay like that for very long.
I hope not.
So let's move on to the powerhouse division of the Western Conference, Pacific Division. I mean, there's not. I mean, we can totally talk about both teams in the same breadth. I mean, the Sacramento Kings and the Phoenix Suns, two dominant CSL teams for forever, from what I can see. I mean, does anyone see? I mean, I can't pick which one's going to be top, which one won't be. I mean, they're normally neck and neck. Can either of you see who's going to be on top?
Not really. I mean, injuries could always be a factor, but I mean, I'll leave it up to Sacramento just because their core is the same as last year, and we knew it was a pretty strong team. I mean, Phoenix, even though we knew they were going to be a good team, I'm still pretty impressed with their team because how good they are with a bunch of new guys. I mean, they lost their core from last year, and yet still performing really well.
Yeah, I would lean Sacramento too. Like I don't necessarily feel strongly about that decision. Just that, if you gave me $100 to bet on one team being above the other at the end of the year, I'd put it on Sacramento. The main difference for me between Sacramento and Phoenix is Phoenix's best scorer is still someone who's just a sophomore in this league, and he was incredible last year and he's been incredible so far this year. And I have no reason to doubt him, but Russell Westbrook's been doing it for longer. than Isaiah Taylor has, so I kind of have to give the nod there. And the rest of the cast around them, right? Like, I'd probably say Otto Porter and Isaiah Austin are as good as each other. Phoenix has Okaro White, but Sacramento has a bunch of other players that are really good, including Richard Solomon, who I think, if I remember correctly, Cleesby, you just had a fun time with Richard Solomon. Is that right?
Yeah, let's not talk about that. I mean, he just single-handedly destroyed us a couple of sims ago. I personally, I'm going to blame that on us losing Gordon Hayward, a vital part of our team, and someone who would definitely not be guarding Richard Solomon. But let's say that he did, and that's the only reason he scored so many points, because he just he broke Hayward. So yeah.
So I just think Sacramento just has a little bit more than Phoenix, and but again, I would like to reiterate, I do not feel good about that pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I can't call it. I mean, both are very good teams and are going to be neck and neck. But for me, the worrying thing as a Western Conference GM is that the Kings obviously are steamrolling at the moment, and they haven't got one of their best players. He's currently sitting out for another 93 days in Nurkic, and when he comes back and replaces, I can't even say his last name, but Andre D, who, let's be honest, doesn't really provide much, and Mitch Gary's not exactly the world's greatest center. That team is a contender again, and probably going to be going further than they did last year, because if they keep everyone healthy. So neck and neck. Yeah, I mean, we'll come back and talk about these guys in a minute, because we'll talk about contenders and dark horses. But let's switch away into the rest of the division, and probably the next category of teams is sort of the borderline playoff guys. The LA Clippers, who got decimated in the offseason, and Golden State Warriors, who finally have a general manager who is playing players in the right position. And how revolutionary is that? I mean, Billy, currently the Clippers are above the Warriors. What are your thoughts on both the teams?
I mean, the Clippers, what they've done with what they've been handed, it's just quite amazing to be 400. It wouldn't have surprised anybody if they were closer to 250 or closer to where my team is. But I think eventually with the Harden Durant combo, Golden State has to just pass Clippers. There's no reason. Those are two of the most dynamic players in the league. Plus, they also have depth, with Payne kind of taking another step this year as the lead point guard, and then Favors is one of the top power forwards in the league. It's one of the best starting five in the NLL from a pure talent standpoint. So I would expect Golden State to get above 500 probably as we get closer to the midpoint of the season. And I think the Clippers, I think they've had good wins and have started off strong, but just with where their talent is, I just can't see that sustaining.
Yeah, the Warriors have so much talent and two of the best players in the league. Obviously Durant's had his injury problems, but clearly that hasn't affected him from a talent standpoint, as he's already averaging 31 points a game on 58% shooting. So in terms of talent, he's still right there. And Harden is still one of the best offensive players in the league. Like, you can't take that away from either one. They're both averaging over 11 free throws attempted per game. So that's absurd. And good luck to any team playing them. But you got to worry about their depth. You got to worry about their health. Durant obviously hasn't been known to be the healthiest player in the league. And they still really don't have a fifth starter, right? They've got Payne, they've got Harden, they've got Durant, and they have Favors. And then they kind of have Terrence Ross or Tim Quarterman, or if they want to start another big man, we're talking like Steven Zimmerman or Marshall Plumlee. They just don't have, any guys around them. And, they'll win enough games to make the playoffs even without that fifth guy, but they're not going to go far without that. And then the Clippers, on the other hand, they don't have any of the top end talent, but they have a lot of guys that, deserve good playing time. There's not a whole lot of players on their roster that, you should say definitely shouldn't be playing. And so it kind of goes both ways. It's like two completely different styles of roster construction.
Yeah,
Sorry, Monroe's had a pretty good year this year, now being the focal point, kind of going back to where he was 3 or 4 seasons ago back in Minnesota, being that double machine. But he's definitely older too, so we'll see if he can sustain it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see both teams, in and around the hunt to begin with. I mean, for kind of different reasons. I mean, the Clippers because, I mean, one things that I always find really frustrating in sim leagues is when you get teams where they're every year, no matter who they have on their team, they always try and win games. And we know there's teams in this league and teams in sim leagues who have so much more talent than the Clippers and are so bad deliberately. And it's great to see, you mentioned Monroe, when some of the guys that the Clippers might have who might have been, not top players, are performing for them and helping them, stay in the hunt and stay relevant, because general managers like that deserve so much credit. And then you look at the Warriors and you see, the talent they've had and how the GM situation has been since I think it was Jeff who probably had them at that point, since he obviously had to leave the league. And it's good to see someone take charge of them and try to get them playing again. So, yeah, I mean, I think we all agree that the Warriors will probably be ahead of the Clippers, but I wouldn't count the Clippers out yet, and I think they'll be active in the trade market as well.
I do have a question. If the Clippers squeeze into the 8th seed, do we think that they'd be a serious candidate for Coach of the Year right there?
He would get my vote instantly. Instantly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because I just did not foresee him being even a playoff contender, and I think, at least at this point, they have a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's no question. I mean, you look at some of the other teams, and yeah, I mean, the way they're performing, if they keep that up, certainly. I guess we'll touch on the Lakers very quickly. Bottom of the division. Anyone see any changes to that, or we'll recap them later on?
Jester Ball's in full action right now, not doing well.
What is Jester Ball again?
It's
trade with me, get an efficient low post score, and that's how you win championships.
Yeah, it's his branded style of play from NLL times with the Miami Heat. So yeah, as Billy said, it's a low post scorer, a dynamic two-way wing, and then a solid point guard, and basically limiting turnovers for yourself, so that you win the possession game. And if you have good shooters, then you win. That's basically a 30-second version of what Jester Ball is. But
there's an article somewhere, and I don't know if it's CSL or NLL, that describes Jester Ball.
Well, I'll tell you the two things that they're not doing, and one of them is taking care of the ball. They're second worst in the league in turnovers per game. Only the Bucks are worse, and that's only by 0.1. And then the other thing too is, and I don't know if this is something that matters to Tim or not, but they're fifth lowest in the league in 3-pointers attempted per game. And there's some really good teams on there, like the Kings and the Suns are actually taking fewer threes per game than the Lakers are, but 3-pointers are worth more than 2-pointers. And so, it doesn't help if you're turning over the ball a lot that you're also not making those points back by getting those extra points.
So I think in summary, we agreed that they're going to be at the bottom of the Pacific Division, and are looking towards the off season already.
But they have their own pick.
They do, exactly. So I mean, we've sort of done a bit of a whistle stop tour of the divisions. Let's dive in and see if we get some agreement on who we think the contenders are going to be, and who the dark horses are going to be for the Western Conference championship, and probably finalists, winners of the CSL this year. Anyone have anything other than, this is my list that I've got: the Kings, the Suns, the Jazz, and the Thunder if they can put it together.
I probably wouldn't have put the Thunder in there because I didn't think they'd be able. I honestly just don't think Andrew will be able to put it together. Or I think it wouldn't surprise me if the team looks completely different by playoff time. But I agree with the other ones, with Dallas being a distant maybe fourth or fifth there.
So to me, there's two contenders, and that's the Suns and the Kings. And I think that the second tier is a much bigger tier in the West. That's the tier that includes like the Jazz and the Mavericks. I just think that the Suns and the Kings are both complete teams that are full of. They both have top end talent. You know that they don't have any weak spots. There's just really, I don't think any of the other teams are on that same level. Not to say that doesn't mean they can't beat them in a 7-game series, but I think those two are still head and shoulders above the rest, even with the way Utah's been playing to start the season.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to. This is how I think the Western Conference is structured. So you have the Suns, the Kings, you then have everyone else, and then you have lottery teams. That's generally how I've seen the Western Conference for like the past 3 years. Do you guys see anyone, from that mid tier in a 7-game series beating the Suns or the Kings?
Yeah, sure.
Anybody, Utah probably. I see them having the best chance, and then we'll see what Oklahoma City does.
Yeah, and I think Dallas can definitely do it too. Brett's definitely one of the more like well-versed GMs in the league. He knows a lot about the game. Certainly a lot more than Utah does. I could easily see Dallas beating Utah in a series just because Brett can kind of not outsmart him necessarily. But hold on one second. Billy,
right, your dog doesn't agree with you, and neither do I. Do you really see this Dallas team, competing against the Suns or the Kings, considering they haven't done it previously, and they've never got over the hump with probably slightly more talent than they have now?
I don't necessarily, but I believe that if anybody's going to give them any trouble, I think it could be Dallas. To your point earlier, I think Sacramento and Phoenix are just so far above the rest that it's going to be tough for any other team.
Yeah, I can't see one. I mean, I think the scary thing about the Kings and the Suns is that they don't look like they're going to slow down anytime soon, and they actually do draft really well. I mean,
well,
say what you want about them, but they always seem to pick up the right guys in the draft. So,
Phoenix does have the potential number 1 pick next year.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the middle tier, we kind of talked about the Thunder earlier, and the issues that they might have with some of the strategy and the team balance. I mean, the Jazz are flying at the moment. I mean, do you think that they really stand a chance this year, or is it a case of come back next year, try again?
I think they have a real chance. I mean, I'm not betting on them or anything, but you've got like I said, Kristaps took that step forward into superstardom. That he never was going to in Dallas because no one wanted to see him succeed in Dallas, but now we don't care because he's not with Brett. So he's doing much better. They've got a solid cast around him, including, like I said, Steph Curry, who's, such a great scorer. I think that this is a real team that can definitely, make a difference in the postseason and be a team that could take out Sacramento or Phoenix for sure. Can they take out? What'll most likely happen is they'll have to take out both teams, and then go up against probably a team like Detroit in the finals. Can they win 3 series like that? I don't know about that, but they can definitely win at least one.
I just think Kristaps, especially with the next ratings boost, could be one of those players that single-handedly take over a game like Anthony Davis does. So you never know. Utah has a lot of great players around Kristaps, so they have the opportunity to do it. But similar to Dallas, I think it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I still think the Suns and the Kings are are miles ahead of the Jazz so far. I think that we kind of mentioned the Jazz kind of have to prove it, but I mean, for me it comes down to who they get to play in the playoffs when they get there. For me, I think the Jazz would much rather prefer to play the Suns than the Kings because of the matchups and because if the Suns had still had Kid Gilchrist, I mean, we might have been talking about the other way around. But for me, I think they have a better chance to beat the Suns than the Kings.
Speaking of dark horses and teams that have, like Kristaps can take over games, I think New Orleans is going to make their way up the standings and be a team in the playoffs because, to my knowledge, Anthony Davis is still the best player in the league in terms of offensive, defensive. He literally contributes so much on both ends of the court. And I know that there are people who, don't feel so great about their supporting cast, but I think that they've got a solid team, and I think that they'll be able to win a first round series at least in the playoffs.
I mean, they just need to find a point guard at this point. I mean, that's if they can find a point guard, that'll help.
I don't know why Joe Jackson isn't starting because Joe Jackson has been a fine starting point guard for them. He doesn't
right now
he plays defense.
It's showing Julian Washburn as their starting point guard.
No, I know. I'm saying I'm surprised that it's
Joe Jackson has been starting, so I'm guessing it's probably been injury. I'm assuming that the depth chart has just isn't changed. But if you look at here, he's played most of the games. So
no, you know what it is? It's the trade. They just made a trade.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
so it resets their depth chart. So that's what DDS that depth chart you saw was what DDS decided was the best lineup for the New Orleans Pelicans. That is the number one lineup to put up. Julian Washburn.
Because I'm like flipping back and forth. I'm like, well, I know where their issue is, but no. And even they have Isaiah Thomas, who doesn't turn the ball over. He's
but he doesn't defend.
He's serviceable.
He doesn't defend.
He doesn't turn it over.
I mean,
he does something well.
Yeah, I again, it's another team that I like to keep an eye on because it's another general manager who tries to win games. So it's always fun to see how they do, and they always try and make moves even if they don't have the assets or they're trying to compete now with what they've got. And I'm really happy that Vucevic has started so well for them, and hopefully he can keep that up some of that form because he's been a really helpful piece next to Davis. So, I mean, yeah, playoff time, who knows? If Davis goes nuts and scores 40 points a game, and they could upset anyone.
Yeah. I mean, they're similar to Utah because they have those players that can take over a game, especially if it's the right matchup where they don't have a big man that can defend.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd just see New Orleans and Utah matchup in the playoffs.
Kristaps against Davis would be interesting. I mean, if you could just see the bottom of the screen, if you look at Davis's playoff stats, they are pretty deadly as well. So if they can get there, and anything could happen for them.
How much longer can New Orleans go with this? I mean, they just don't have a lot around them.
I mean, it just takes one lucky move, With a player like Davis, you just keep hoping that you just find that player, and maybe you never do, but I'd rather keep taking those shots.
Yeah, they have him for 4 more years, so for the remainder of his the peak of his career there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess looking at staying in the Southwest, we've talked about Dallas a bit and the Pelicans. The Grizzlies are a team that are always in the playoffs and play good defense. Do either of you two see them as potential upset setters this year?
Not upsetters, but I think they could squeeze in. I mean, if you look at it, all the teams are battling for that 7th and 8th spot, and I think Memphis has a good shot of fitting into one of those last 2 playoff spots there. But I mean, you're going to play a team like Phoenix, Sacramento, or Utah. So I mean, maybe if they play Utah, they might have a chance. But if they play one of the Pacific teams, I just don't see them having any upsets there.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of defense. They just don't really have like when the playoff comes and teams shorten their rotations and they play their best players more. I just don't see any player on Memphis being able to take that next step. You know what I mean? You have to have players who can step up even when it gets challenging like that, and I don't think Memphis has those players. That's the problem.
I mean, not even. I think the disappointing thing for Memphis so far has been Harry Giles so far. He's been shooting awfully, and they've had to limit his minutes. So I think they were kind of hoping that he would be one of the guys who could step up and give them something extra, and kind of hasn't worked out for them so far.
No, but Giles is young, but shooting 21% is pretty atrocious too.
It is. It is. So let's move on to the other side of the conference and away from the playoffs and contenders and the thing we all care about, and let's talk about the lottery and the draft and teams that are probably going to be down there. So I mean, looking at the standings at the moment, it's yourself, Billy, with the Spurs, and obviously Jester with the Lakers, and then it could be anyone, to be honest with you, at the moment. Everyone else is kind of in that middle pack, really. I mean, Billy, what's your take on the Spurs this year? Is it a write-off season already, going 3-12, or is it just a bad bit of form? Do you expect you guys to be in the lottery this year?
Oh, we expected to be in the lottery going into the season. We were looking forward to seeing Livingston see what he can do, and he's kind of lived up to what we expected. I think I'm frustrated with Gary Harris. I mean, with him and Moutier, I think those two are just not working together. So, hoping I can make a move to get Moutier or Harris, one of them, out, because I think both of those players will probably perform better without the other. Plus, Harris will perform better at the shooting guard position. So, hopefully, more to come there, but. Really happy with Biombo. I mean, he's been a double-double machine with 2 blocks. So, I mean, for the talent I have, I really can't complain. I think we have a great future ahead of us with a lot of flexibility, a lot of cap.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I noticed when looking at Gary Harris, and I'm looking in the game, but man, he is just getting abused defensively, and I think that's because he's 6'4" and 190 pounds playing small forward. And I think that if you can just kind of sort out the balance on your roster a little bit better and get Harris back at shooting guard, I think he'll perform better on both ends because he'll be playing guys more kind of his size. I've always been curious as to like understanding kind of like why certain players have more shots faced than the others.
Mm-hmm.
But I think teams just look at that small forward position, look at, tiny Gary Harris and say, all right, well, here's a mismatch, and they take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's been a tough season, but like I said, I think there's a lot of hope moving forward, and hopefully there'll be some good players in this upcoming draft. That I know there's some big names, but we'll see how they actually look.
I like Livingston for you though. Livingston was I think
Oh,
a good pick. I mean, obviously his shooting remains to be seen, but he definitely looks like a good floor general.
no, I mean he's averaging 7 assists a game with very little scorers around him. So I think we put the right players around him that can shoot and score. I mean, I think we could see those numbers back up another assist and a half a game.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some good young talent there, and I think it's like you said, it's a case of getting the balance right and probably picking someone up in the draft who can propel you back into that playoff hunt next year. I don't see that being a long rebuild. I mean, is that something you see as well? It's not going to be a 5-10 year job. It might just be a 1 or 2 seasons.
I think it could be, to your point, 2 seasons. I'm thinking we will probably have nearly $30 million in cap space next year, plus hopefully a top 3 pick, and then we'll see how we use the pick. But that usually means we could probably get back to being competitive pretty quickly. So I don't expect us to be a playoff team next year, but I definitely want to be in that middle group, especially with Livingston having another year and Harris finding the right spot.
Yeah. Miles, is it shocking that we're talking about lottery teams and I'm not even going to talk about the Denver Nuggets?
Yeah, it's shocking. It just goes to show how bad of a podcast host you are. I mean, really, you should be talking about relevant teams. I mean, look, we're in the playoffs now. We're a 500 team, and again, like I think we have more talent than I like to give ourselves credit for. But I'd still be surprised if we made the playoffs. To be perfectly honest, as much as I'm going to be fighting for that, I would be surprised to see it happen. And I'm okay with kind of like a low end lottery pick. And the truth is I do need to find more talent. I don't think I need to be at the top of the lottery to do that, but again, I see the teams out in the West, and even though it is a very top heavy conference, there's still a lot of really good teams and a lot of teams whose talent I would take above mine. Just looking at the standings, the conference standings, there's 3 teams that are currently quote unquote not in the playoffs. That's New Orleans, Golden State, and Portland. And I would bet on any one of those 3 teams being above my team by season's end. So,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could talk about the Timberwolves as well, but they don't have a lottery pick, so there's probably not much point in delving into their situation in the off season. I mean, the Lakers, we know, are actively, not not actively not looking to perform this year. It's probably a polite way of putting it, but guys, what do you think about the Lakers situation? I mean, so many big men and nothing else. um, is this going to be a long rebuild for the Lakers?
I
I
don't
think
think
it's going to be longer. Well, I think it's going to be longer because they just don't have any assets right now that I see them sticking with for the long term. We'll see how the draft um, shakes out for them, but I think they also have some cap space too. They're right at yeah, they have cap space. So I mean, we'll see what they do during free agency. They didn't do anything this year, but I also don't see Jester just kind of trying to flip a dime and trying to be a playoff team next year. I think it's going to be a slower build for him, unless he walks into a nice opportunity with trades.
I think they have 2 core big men in Papagiannis and Wood, especially the way Papagiannis has been playing so far this year. I think he's going to end up not being a huge bust. And I think Wood is a very good player as well, especially offensively, but he also has blocked a ton of shots in his career. And I think Tyler Stone's going to get flipped at the before the deadline. He definitely has value to a contender. So I think it's just going to be about finding their backcourt, and they've got. I mean, I think in my mind they've got a lot of good chips. Moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. I'm glad Papagiannis is kind of panning out for them. I mean, they've got some weird experiment where they're playing him at small forward at the moment, so kind of says everything about this season. But yeah, interesting to see who they draft and who they scout, and when we get to that point, um, yeah, they've got some good building pieces. It's nice to see Diallo's come on pretty well, even though he's not actually playing for them this year, but. He had a good season last year, considering he was only a second round pickup. But I think the most worrying thing about the current lottery situation is that I might have a lottery pick this year. And we know how long I took last year with not last year, the year before with draft picks. So that could be dangerous. And if the simmer is listening to this, probably don't want us to be in the lottery anytime soon. But I mean, if we look at the conference as a whole, is there any other team that do you guys see that might not necessarily be a contender, might not necessarily be a lottery team, who are just an interesting team to follow this year?
I mean, Chris, I think your team is going to be real interesting with what you do outside the playoffs. I mean, you've stuck with this team for the second season and done an amazing job. So I definitely want to see what you do and see how because I really do believe you're a playoff team. So I don't know if you have moves coming up to just kind of retool, but your team is definitely interested, especially with Marcus Smart. Having him on my team, I know how dynamic he can be. So he's one of those players that I don't know if he can necessarily carry a whole game by himself, but he's right below that next tier. He's a dynamic star there, all star. So really interested about Portland.
As far as interesting teams go, I'm really interested in seeing what happens with Dallas this year, because I think they, if they're not at their same, 55 plus win pace, a little closer to, maybe like January or so, we could definitely see some moves being made in Dallas, especially if they're still floating around 500. So, that's a team that can go a lot of different directions, and who knows what Brett will do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, two teams stick out really, and one is Dallas for the reasons that you kind of mentioned. The other one I'm going to come back to is OKC. I mean, we kind of mentioned that they might, begin the season, we probably thought that they may have been contenders. Looks like so far they're not going to be, but just to see what Andrew does with this team and whether he makes any drastic moves, whether he tries to stick it out, just to see how that dynamic works for a GM who's probably not used to having that much pressure on him, I guess, from the talent perspective. So, yeah, interesting to see how he does, because we kind of mentioned it's a team that most people are expecting to win most of their games, and they're not at the moment. So I'll be interested to see how they do.
I mean, who do you think is going to finish off better at the end of the season? I mean, they're both 9-7 between Dallas and OKC.
For me, Dallas, Miles.
Um, I'm gonna have to go with Dallas too.
Yeah, I think I just have to, with Brett's history, I think we all have to go with Dallas. I mean, he's got so much talent on the team still.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oklahoma City will figure it out, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll certainly see. I mean, we'll kind of wrap up here, but before we kind of go, Western Conference champion, you got one choice. Who do you think it's going to be?
Sacramento for me. I mean, it doesn't seem like they're slowing down.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier if I had to bet on a team, it'd be Sacramento, so I'm gonna stick with that. But if I'm gonna just for funsies bet on a long shot here. I think a long shot team that could really do well would be Golden State. I think they could, they might end up being a 6th or 7th seed, but they have the talent to beat any team if we only look at their top 4 players. So if they can keep those guys healthy and they can keep those guys on the court as much as possible in the playoffs, that could be a team that could easily surprise a lot. Or I don't know about surprise, but they could easily pull some upsets.
Yeah, it's a shame it's not a big three league. Otherwise, they would be top certainly. So, yeah, teams to watch out for. For me, it's the Kings. I think the Kings are, I've in an envelope, blank envelope at the beginning of the season. That's who I'd have written down to win the CSL. So, yeah, for me, coming out of the West, it's the Sacramento Kings. Guys, it's been great to have you on. Great to hear your thoughts about the Western Conference. Best of luck with this season. Miles, don't be too good. Billy, hope your season pans out how you want and you manage to get a good draft pick.
If I'm
Thanks.
better than you, Chris, then this podcast becomes the Denver Nuggets podcast.
Maybe. We'll see.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Y'all take care.